Good evening, Ajahn. Good evening, everyone here in the hall and everyone in our online audience. Thank you for joining us. Tonight's guided meditation is taken by Ajahn Sādaro. Thank you, Ajahn, for leading this tonight. We have a quick few announcements before we get into the guided meditation. 3 special upcoming events. We have the BSV AGM on Sunday the 28th of April at 2 p.m. here at the Buddhaloka Centre. You can register for that through our website. There also, we have 2 special teaching events, if you like. Ajahn Brahm is giving his second talk here in Melbourne this coming Friday, the 22nd. That will be at 7 p.m, which is a bit earlier than we normally start the evening talk. So 7 p.m. this Friday, Ajahn Brahm from Thailand. And we have an Easter weekend meditation retreat, a non-residential retreat. Unfortunately, that won't be available online, so apologies to the YouTube audience. But if you're here in Melbourne, that will be run from Good Friday, the March the 29th, until Easter Monday, the 1st of April. It's 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. each day. It'll be led by Bhante Sangamaji, who's an Austrian monk, who's been a monk for 24 years. And the retreat theme will be goodness, kindness, and wisdom. No registration required. You can find out more from the website or the newsletter. The upcoming regular teaching program, there will be a guided meditation tomorrow night taken by a lay teacher, Simon. We have the Make Meditation a Healthy Habit every Monday to Thursday evening at 7 p.m. That's online through Discord. And in the mornings between 4 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. we have the New Day, New Mind daily meditation group. So lots of opportunities to develop your meditation practice. And on Saturday at 7 p.m. we'll have the online Sutta discussion group, which runs every 2 weeks. The sutta that's been chosen for next Saturday is Majjhima Nikaya 86 about Angulimala. So that'll be an interesting one. So next week's teaching program on the Sunday and then the Monday night guided meditation will be taken by Ajahn Mudito. So that's all the announcements. Just a reminder, if you're here in the hall, to please turn your mobile phone off or onto silent. And after the guided meditation, there will be time for some question and answer at about 8:30 p.m. Thank you, Ajahn.
Perfect. Thanks, Langdon. There's a lot of meditation stuff going on. Every day has something. There's always something big on. I guess it's just a matter now of showing up and doing it. There's a lot of instruction now. I guess you all just have to do it at this point. And speaking of doing it, is there anybody here? It's maybe their first time here tonight. Nope. So you've all been doing it for a long time? That's good. Anybody here reasonably new to meditation? Yeah? Reasonably new? Yep. Okay. Have you done any meditation before? A little bit? Yeah. What kind of meditation have you really done?
I've done it at the time.
Okay, nice. Yeah, great. Yep. Good. Very good institute. Yep. And what about yourselves at the back? Nice, very good. And what about you two up the back there? Okay, perfect. Very good. Okay, so most people know the drill then. So we'll be sitting for around about an hour, and then we'll finish up about 8:30. And if you have any questions after that, we're more than welcome to ask questions. But with that, we might get started. If you just want to take a comfortable seat. Whatever is the most comfortable for you, either in a chair or on the floor. You can gently close your eyes, or if you prefer to keep your eyes open, you also can as well. And just start by noticing the sounds all around you, just as we all settle in. All the different array of sounds, some natural, humans, animals, others not natural, sounds of cars, machines. The main thing to recognize is that these sounds, we don't choose them, they just appear. They drift in and drift out of our awareness without us choosing to hear them in any way. You can notice the different sensations throughout your body, all the different buzzes and tingling that permeates throughout your body, the temperature, even the slight adjustments and movements that your body makes as it balances here. And again, just notice that this is a completely impersonal process. You can't change the feeling of the temperature on your skin. Or the tingles in your hands or feet. Or the feeling of pressure in your body. It's just something that appears to you and ebbs and flows and changes and then disappears. And finally, just take a moment to become aware of your mental state or your emotive state. You feeling ready to practice? Feeling calm? Are you feeling agitated? Whatever it is, just simply notice it for what it is and try to observe it. Not to be it, but just to see it. Whatever it is, you can just simply let it be. Now just start to settle into your own regular method of meditation, that technique or style that you find is most useful for you. Maybe the breath or a mantra or a visualization or sounds, whatever it is that you usually use. Just spend the next few minutes just settling into your practice. extremely complex external lives. We're overflooded with information, and especially information about what meditation or mindfulness is. But as you sit here and meditate and practice, is it possible to just drop all of your preconceived notions about what meditation is? If it could be the simplest activity there is, what would that simple act of meditation be? All of your ideas of what it should or should not be, can you put all of those down? Sweep them all aside. And gradually let go all of these notions. And be content with a simple practice. The wanting it to be one way or another. Can you just be okay with your practice as it is right now, in its most simple form? Not having to do anything special. Just this. Can you make your practice even more simple? spend an enormous amount of time thinking about ourselves, thinking about the person we are, what others expect us to be, how we should be, who we were, who we are now. We have endless notions of who we think we are. What would it be like if you could just drop all of those notions, those concepts of who you think you are, even just for a moment? What would it be like if you can release this grasp that you have on this idea of you? What is the most simple, non-conceptual version of you that you can experience? What happens when all those ideas about who you are drop away? Your experience just is. Who are you in this most simple state? what is the most simple state of being that you can experience? we all, at times, struggle with trying to realize or see something in our practice, to get calm, or to understand or see not self. But if we struggle to see this, all we're doing is reifying this sense of self. If what we are already is not self, what is it that we're struggling to realize? It's already there. Things are already not self. All it takes is us noticing it. Things are already this way. There's nothing to struggle. There's nothing to realize. There's nothing to break through. There's nothing to change. Things are already not self as they are. As soon as we drop all our notions, it appears. Why struggle to find something that's already there with you right at this moment? You can start to take a few deep breaths. Maybe any tension or stiffness that's in the body. These last few deep breaths, you can just exhale that tension out and relax. You can start to gently shift your position, adjust your body. And whenever you're ready, you can gently open your eyes and we'll end the meditation here. No bell tonight, just a license to fidget and move. It stops the meditation. It's amazing. People are sort of sitting there, oh, it started to hurt, I've been here for an hour. And then as soon as I say, oh, you can start to move, everyone just... Very nice. Okay, now's the time. If anybody has any things been coming up in the practice, anything they want to talk about, any questions that they have, you're more than welcome to ask now. Do questions in the room, and if there's maybe some online.
Who are we without our identity, our sense of self?
Yep. Really good question. So I'll repeat that for the people that are online. Very good, very succinct question. Who are we if we are not our identity and we are not ourselves? That's sort of what people have been wrestling with for millennia. Like, who are we if we're not ourselves? And so there's this idea here is that we need an identity to be cohesive. We need a self to actually move through the world, and we need a self to essentially we identify with experience. You need a self to, in some way, to differentiate different people, different objects, different organisms. And so essentially what we end up doing most of the time is whatever we're experiencing, whatever's sort of arising in our experience, we kind of identify with it. I'm looking at you at the moment, and basically I think I am seeing you right now. I'm seeing all these people that are in the room. And so there's a kind of identification with my experience at this point in time. And so this kind of identification is important to some extent because, usually, this tells us that we're moving through the world in a safe way. We're minimizing our own suffering. We're producing flourishing for ourselves. So this kind of identification, to some extent, it is useful. This is the way that we're identifying with things. Now, we can also consider that at times the way we identify with who we are is maybe not so useful. Whenever something changes about our experience, we don't like this thing. Whenever something comes up where some kind of negative states that are in the mind, it's my negative states that are coming up in the mind, my negative thoughts. I am thinking this kind of way. So there's the idea here is that we are identifying with things all the time, and we're sort of relating to our experience in this kind of way. And now, so the problem isn't really the sense of self or the identity, it's the relationship to it. It's how we're relating to our identity. That's really the problem. Now, if experience just is as it is, and I'm seeing all these people, colors and all these kinds of things, but I'm not going, I am seeing you, and I think this is a good question, and I'm doing my best to answer it, and hang on, maybe I haven't explained this properly, I should think about saying it another way, wrapping myself up in all these kinds of complexities about my identity. If it's just, okay, there's an experience here at this moment, I'm not identifying with it, then it's okay. It's the kind of relationship with the identity that is more the problem, not the actual identity itself. And so if we can just sort of get out of the way of that, then it actually, we can still move throughout the world. We can still, be useful and be, function well, have a sense of responsibility. We can do all these different kinds of things without all the associated problems that we usually have. This kind of, I need to do this, I need to do that. Things should be this way, they shouldn't be that way. If we can do this, then we can actually move around in the world without clinging to our identity, without clinging to this sense of self. It really is this grasping and clinging and this identification with this thing that really is the problem that as Buddhists, we're trying to get over. So look, the self or the not self, that's not really the problem. It's the kind of identification with it, the attachment to it. That's really the problem, and that's really the thing that we're trying to get over. So does that make sense, or sort of?
Ego, our self-identity, our ego.
So the question.
We try and defend, in our life.
Yep.
Like my ego interacting with your ego.
Yep.
I'm asking the question.
Yep.
Answering.
Yep.
So, and then we do what we are doing with a sense of detachment, rather than clinging to here I am and what it is, the sense of detachment.
Yeah. Yeah. So the follow-up question, just for anybody online, is is this the ego that we're talking about, and is it what we're trying to accomplish here to some extent, or trying to realize here to some extent, is a detachment from the ego? There's this idea that egos are always interacting. Egos are the things that are the problem. Is that really this kind of attachment to the ego? Is that really the problem? And do we get rid of that problem when we detach from the ego? Is that a fair assumption of your question? Okay, perfect. So in many ways, that is right. That is right. It's this kind of, you can call it an ego, you can call it a sense of self, you can call it a deep-seated sense of permanent identity, you can call it whatever you like. If we're really sort of becoming wrapped up in and attached to it, and you're really thinking it has to be this way, your ego is, I'll use another person because I don't want to, I'm talking to you and it's like your ego says this to me and it hurts my ego, and now my ego is crushed, and and how am I'm just gonna react badly because my ego has been hurt in some kind of way. So yeah, again, it's this kind of identification with the ego, with the identification with the self. It's interpreting the ego in a particular kind of way. Again, if we're not, you're right, if we're detached from this thing, if we're not sort of identifying with it, there isn't really a problem there. You can interact in the world. You're left with the problem of action. We still have to act. We still have to move around in the world. We have to speak to other people. We have to move through the world. We have to pay bills, do all these different kinds of things. We still have to act. We can't get away from acting. But if we can do this from a sense where we're detaching from our ego in this kind of way, it's actually a lot easier to move through the world. You can still do it effectively. But all those kinds of problems that come along with attaching to the ego, you're crushing my ego, I'm supporting your ego, all these different kinds of things, all these problems sort of melt away, and we can still actually operate effectively in the world. So yeah, it really is that kind of, if we can learn to detach from the ego, then this is a very healthy way to be. This is we're in a state of freedom at that time, because we're not being dragged around by the ego. Most of the time we're just getting dragged everywhere. But if we become free of that, it's like, okay, the thing does its job. There's thoughts appear up here, in the middle of the head somewhere, okay, and it's telling me that I need to sleep, I need to move, I need to eat, I need to walk outside, whatever it is. Those things can still occur, but there's no kind of attachment to it, so there's no real problem there. And so we can act in this very natural way. We can act in this very natural and harmonious way if we can operate this way. So yeah, that you've hit the nail on the head. If you detach from this ego, then this is the the most healthy and useful way to be. Easy to say, hard to do. So yeah. Yeah.
So we are not our mind. We are not the thought process. We are far bigger than the mind.
Mm.
Like I say, I see my hand.
Mm.
Whose hand am I seeing?
Mm.
Are there two people here?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking at my hand.
Yep.
So who is this person?
Yeah.
Whose hand is it?
Yeah, yeah.
So who are we?
Yep.
Without the mind, the thought process, or the analytical mind, or whatnot.
Yep. Yep.
So we are a part of the divine light energy,
Yeah, yeah.
which has been,
Mm.
which will be,
Mm.
and we are also changing forms, coming and going.
Mm.
But we don't look upon ourselves as that.
Mm.
We come and we have our identity, and then the identity is always trying to defend itself.
Yep.
Which is actually in a way false,
Mm.
because that will be left behind
Mm.
when we move on.
Mm.
So, as you were saying, it's very hard to do. How do we go around detaching ourselves?
Yep.
from this identity?
Yep. And again, just for the benefit of people online, the question now comes up as like, well, who exactly are we? Are we separate from the mind in some kind of way? When we have an experience, it's like in some kind of way, the experience is, that I am essentially seeing my hand at the moment. There's a me that's seeing the hand, and am I the thoughts that I have, or are we, or is this this question of who am I? Is this much bigger? Are we part of something bigger? Are we part of something bigger than the mind? Is there something beyond this? Is there some kind of cosmic conscious that we're a part of? Exactly. So the question basically is like, who am I? And is that a decent version of your question? So I think so. Some of these. You could say like a broader kind of metaphysical question: are we part of like a cosmic conscious or something like that? I think it's hard for us to answer those kinds of questions. What I think we can answer to with a little bit more certainty, at least in our own experience, in our own phenomenological experience, is what is the experience like now? So there's this idea that these thoughts appear, and I think that they're my thoughts. There's thoughts are sort of appearing in the middle of my head, and I think, well, it's sort of in my voice, and they're appearing for me. I have these thoughts. You can't hear my thoughts, so then they have to be my thoughts in some kind of way. Now, so we generally think it was like, I am the owner of my thoughts. I am my thoughts. Now, if we actually observe our experience, again, we observe our phenomenological experience in this kind of way, we can start to, at least for me, what I observe is that it's like, well, it's not really like my thoughts. There isn't really an owner of thoughts there. It's just thoughts occur. Thoughts occur there. There isn't really an owner there of those thoughts. It's just thoughts. Just like if you sit here at the moment, you hear the sounds of my voice. The sounds of my voice come and goes, but the sound from my voice to you, it isn't your sound. It's just sound. It's just a bunch of languages moving through the air, and it's coming in contact with your ears in some kind of way. It's coming, it's going, but there isn't really like an owner there of the sound of the language that's coming through to you. Likewise with the thoughts that we have, there isn't really an owner there. It's just like a bunch of sound that's occurring internally within us. So the idea here is that if we can see our experience in this way as, you could say, essenceless or ownerlessness in this way, I think this is a kind of observation that we can make. This is it's a kind of phenomenological observation that we can make about our experience, that it doesn't really have an owner. It's just these things that arise and pass away. And now we get to the question of like, well, of course, I choose my thoughts. I choose to think things in a particular kind of way. I have intention, I have will, all these kinds of things. Don't I choose my thoughts? Don't I control my thoughts? And I think if we're really like brutally honest with ourselves, you just sat here for an hour meditating, and what's the one thing that keeps coming to annoy you? Yeah. And do you want them to be there? No. So do you really actually control them, or do they just appear? Yeah. So there's this idea that these things appear in our experience, And we may be able to sort of go, oh, okay, this one's a bit more useful, that one's a bit more useful. But again, the kind of choice that we have of the thoughts, we don't really choose that thing either. So these things just appear in our experience. And so the idea here is that there isn't really like an owner of experience. It is just experience happening. Now, again, getting back to that problem, okay, very easy to say, very hard to do, but that's what the practice is for. That's what we're aiming for in our practice. We're just essentially trying to change this relationship with what we identify with. We're trying to change the way that we're sort of representing reality. We're trying to change our perception of it. We're trying to change our relationship to it. And if we can see, okay, there's just things that are just appearing, things just appearing and going, then, and if we can do this and we can accept this for what it is and just be okay with it, okay, well, the thoughts that have come up are terrible. They're all, they're not very nice at the moment. I'm having these bad thoughts, but if I don't really identify with them, they can just go and they don't have a power and they don't have a hold over you anymore. So again, just to summarize that, I don't think we can, I'm not sure if it's quite so useful to make these like grand metaphysical claims of, we're part of a cosmic consciousness and all these kinds of things. I think it's, at least for me, what is useful is just trying to look at our own experience, trying to look at our own phenomenology, taking an epistemic stance on these things as well, what am I actually experiencing right now? And I think this is the thing where we can actually see that there isn't this kind of owner, there isn't this identifier there. It's just experience occurring, and it doesn't really need a self to operate. It just happens all by itself, just like the meditation. Thoughts just pop up all by themselves, and so the rest of our experience is somewhat like that. So yeah, that's about as clear as I can get that, I think. Yeah. No problem.
Ajahn, we have some online questions,
Yep.
couple.
Yep.
The first question is, sometimes during meditation there are human sounds that are beyond your control. I notice my irritation at them and try to defocus. However, at times it feels like the more I try to defocus, the more they seem to get focused. How can one let go of these compulsive needs and simply learn acceptance of phenomena during meditation?
Yeah, human sounds are the worst. The sounds of humans are terrible. It's funny because it's like, okay, so yeah, we like the sound of birds and nature and all these kinds of things, but we hate the sound of humans. We hate artificial sounds. We don't like the sounds of cars, but we like the sound of the rain and all these kinds of things. But if we're looking at our experience closely, it is all just sounds. They are just sounds. As basically we're conceptualizing them as something that is either natural or artificial, as human or as another species. And this is, in some way, this is what brings up the problem for us. Oh, the camera's over there. So this is the thing that tends to bring up the problem for us, that we want sounds to be other than the way that they are, and we categorize and we conceptualize sounds as either a good sound or a bad sound. It's something for myself I had to deal with quite a lot in my practice. In another quote unquote life kind of thing. I was a musician, and so constantly pulling apart sounds and music and trying to figure out structures and melodies and all these kinds of things, and key changes and all time signature changes and all these kinds of things. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to give all that up, and I'm going to go to Thailand, and I'm going to go and live in the forest, and it's going to be peaceful, and all I'm ever going to hear is the sound of squirrels and rustling in trees and all these kinds of things. And anybody that's sort of lived in some of these places, especially if you're near rubber farms, you have all these farmers that wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and have boom boxes going of songs and all these kinds of things. And it's like, oh, okay, now I just have to sort of sit here and deal with the fact that there's loud blaring music in my peaceful hut. So again, it's this kind of, so you have to work with this stuff, and it takes a lot of time to actually deal with it. And it really is just this matter of going, okay, well, the sounds that are experienced, I'm not choosing them. I can't choose not to hear what I am actually hearing in the present moment. This is just something that's arisen now. I didn't choose to actually hear the thing. The thing is just there. Now, if we see these things in this way, whether it's a human sound, whether it's an artificial sound, whether it's a sound in nature, whether it's the sound of carabao blasting at 2 o'clock in the morning from the rubber farmers. Anybody that's Thai will know that that's a good joke. That carabao is a good joke, but anyway, I'll let that slide. If we can actually start to recognize this as that we don't choose these things and they're just there, and the way that we're labeling them and we're interpreting and we're conceptualizing them in something that we like or we don't like, then this is really the problem. Once that problem's gone, you can hear any sounds. You can hear any sounds, and it doesn't really matter. It can be the sound of humans. It can be the sounds of artificial things. It can be the sound of praise. It can be the sound of blame. In the end, it just becomes sound, something that's appearing, and it's not really something that you can choose to control in any way, or you can't really control that you actually experience it. So I think if we sort of reflect in this way a lot, then it actually does become a lot easier to deal with all these different sounds. And trust me, like running away from the human sounds doesn't work. Like, there's a whole bunch of other sounds out there in the world that are going to annoy you as well. You can't get away from them. So I think if we learn to deal with the sounds, as I said, it doesn't matter where you are. I spent, the majority of my monastic life, I've lived in forest monasteries, and now I spend a lot of time like in a metropolitan area. There's people wandering around, there's cars, all these kinds of things. And people ask me, it's like, oh, doesn't that bother you in your meditation? It's like, nowadays it's like, no, just doesn't make a difference. Whether it's the sound of crickets, or it's the sound of like somebody walking their dog and like screaming at their children at 8 o'clock in the morning to hurry up because they don't want to spill their coffee on them. Like, it doesn't really matter anymore. So again, it's kind of, like we were saying before, it's the identification with this. It's how we're identifying, it's how we're relating to these things. That's really the problem. The sound isn't the problem at all. It's our relationship to it. So yeah, you can't run away from human sounds. Anybody that's lived in the forest and lived around a lot of birds are just as annoying. There's like, I lived in Canberra for a while, and there's a lot of cockatoos in Canberra, and it's awful. Like they sound, they're always like screaming. There's a monastery here and they have, like in Victoria, you have barking deer. And so you're sitting there and like it's 11 o'clock at night. Oh wow, this is really peaceful. This is really quiet. This is great. And all of a sudden you hear this. Ah! It's like somebody's getting stabbed out the side of your hut. It's like, look, the sounds of nature are just as bad as human sounds. So sometimes human sounds can at least be nice to you. So yeah.
Are there any more questions in the hall?
Yeah, good time for one. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Just in relation to what the lady was, her questions, and so I'm sitting here, and she opened the dialogue opened my mind too. I started to self-witness. I was sitting here without a thought, and what I became aware of is that I am simply awareness, which is formless.
Yep.
I'm witnessing myself, witnessing the world. So there's 3 steps: awareness, that is witnessing myself, as I, through my eyes and ears, witness the world. Yeah. And it's something that I actually forgot to do. Which is still the mind and just witness myself. Anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah, good observation. And I think, there's something there of, I think I closed the meditation off with it. We have this idea that all, if we're Buddhists and we're taking this Buddhist idea seriously of that, that all phenomena are not self, sabbe dhamma anatta, that all phenomena are not self, that this is something that's apparent already. This is something that is the ontologically underlying structure of things. And so if things are already that way, then there's nothing that we really need to do there. And so this idea of like dropping back into awareness itself, or the witnessing, or whatever you want to call it, this is something that we can tap into to some extent. And you're right, the thing that usually happens is we get sort of caught up. Essentially we get caught up, thoughts occur, we get caught up in it, we start to believe the thoughts, we're hearing things, I like that thing, that thing's confusing, I don't like that thing, whatever it is. Essentially we just keep getting caught up and we keep forgetting. But it is these moments where we can sort of drop all that, again, and part of the meditation was these ideas about ourselves, these ideas about meditation. Can you just drop all that? Can all of that, if you drop all that, what's the simplest version of experience that you can actually have? And, if we can do this, then we just sort of glimpse these moments of, witnessing, awareness, not self, whatever you want to call it, in any one particular time. So, essentially we you could say we tune into it at some point, and then other times we just sort of get dragged around and we forget about it. So it's, part of the practice is really just this kind of, how do we tune into it more? How do we come back to it more? How do we glimpse it more? How do we just return to it over and over again? And that, that really is the, I think that's the work that needs to be done. Good reflection.
Can I just make one more comment? Because as you were
Yep.
talking, I was just witnessing my experience.
Yep.
Witnessing my experience again, but I realised that I needed a stimulus, which is you speaking. So then I'm listening. So since I'm listening, I'm not thinking because I've got a focus.
Yep.
And as I was witnessing, my mind is still. And then, so I just realised sometimes you need a stimuli, but to still the mind and just become aware of being aware.
For sure.
And that awareness that is witnessing myself is actually formless, because if you try to find where it is, what is that awareness? There's no location. It's just formless, isn't it? But it is totally aware. It's totally awake. Anyway, just another passing thought.
Yeah, sometimes we need external things to jog us. Sometimes we tap into it ourselves. Different times where we can sort of access these things in different kinds of ways. So yeah, did you have a question? Yeah. Yep. Good to see you again as well. Yeah.
I feel like at this point we're kind of having a conversation about what are we without our senses, and how to identify with that, and things that go along with it. And I kind of feel like one clarifying idea is that, like, when you read into this sort of stuff, a lot of the monks, they write about your chitta, and I personally don't know what organ the chitta would be stored in. And it seems sort of like itself a natural stream of consciousness that doesn't necessarily, it can be associated with a body, but it but it's more dynamic than that. And I was just sort of thinking, one thing, if we're not going to identify with our bodies, we might not be smart to identify with our chitta as well. And I guess just to turn it into a question, like, another one towards the end of Mahaboa's autobiography thing, he mentions this thing, Dhamma raga, something like that. That seems to be like a really advanced sort of concept. Do you, maybe just to point out, just for the sake of conversation, do you have more things you could list off like that, like pointing, like phenomena that aren't necessarily person-based, that we could at least look to think about things that are not ours, like our bodies, that we could also witness?
So really good question, really deep question, and things about like Dhamma raga and things like that. It's there's a lot to unpack with these things. Now, so we can sort of wade into these territories of, should we identify with the chitta? And just for anybody that doesn't know, chitta is a Pali term that is generally translated as mind. Some people translate it in different ways. Some people have different ideas about what the chitta is. But generally speaking, so you have like Chittanupasana, these kinds of things, insight into the mind. So chitta generally means like the kind of the mind. Now, so this, so the question here is, and the kind of ideas here is like, well, we don't want to attach to the body, but should we also not attach to something like the chitta? And yeah, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. But I also don't think essentially we don't really have to go that far. We don't have to get into this kind of, we don't have to sort of wade into the problem of dualism here. Because if we say that the mind is one thing and the body is another, then we're basically, we're talking about a phenomena that's outside, outside of the khandhas. Basically the idea is you have the 5 khandhas, but then there's the chitta that's outside of it. We don't really want to get into that problem. So I think in many ways, we don't really actually have to go there. We can just look into the 5 khandhas and go, well, we have obviously the body, as you said, and this is something we don't want to identify with. The Vedana, the feelings that we have, we don't want to identify with those. Sanya, our perceptions or memories, or however you want to translate it, we don't really have to identify with them. Sankharas, and I think of sankharas as any kind of mental activity or thought. We don't really have to identify with that. And the kind of the consciousness of the 6 sense organs, we don't really have to identify with that. So if we take this Buddhist position seriously, it's like, well, that is what we are as a human. The 5 khandhas are what we are as human, and we shouldn't identify with that. So if we are actually doing that, we can not identify with the what we call the nama khandhas, the feeling, perception, mental activity, and consciousness. Just not identifying with that, that's already sort of pretty good, without sort of like wading into the chitta, into the kind of chitta territory. So you could say this is the kind of the epiphenomenal things that we don't want to identify with, these aspects of the khandhas. And I think if we do that, then questions of the chitta, if we get to them, okay, we'll fine, we'll get to that. We'll get to that point when we sort of arrive there, maybe, and we can maybe answer it in a little bit better detail. But I think for now, without sort of like wading into those sort of dualistic territories kind of thing. So I think we can just look at our experience and go, well, yeah, there's these, you could say there's mental aspects of our experience that we just shouldn't identify with. Even the feeling of being a self is something that arises within the khandhas. I think it's like a combination of sanya and sankhara, and sort of an overlap with vijnana, like that gives rise to this sense of me being a self in the middle of experience in some kind of way. I think if we pull those aspects of the khandhas apart, and then we sort of see that, okay, well, then they're ownerlessness, they're not really in anybody's control. I think for me, just personally, I think that's enough. So, yeah, I think if we think about the khandhas in this way, then we actually don't really get into that problem of dualism. It is just, okay, we just don't attach to the khandhas, and it seems useful enough. So, yeah, but, I guess anything, the final sort of thought on that is, whatever comes up in experience and whatever we label experience to be, and however we conceptualize experience and however we, internalize and represent experience, if that's a chitta, that's dhamma-raga, any of these kinds of things, whatever we experience, as long as if we can not identify with it and not attach to that, we can just see it as phenomena that arises and passes away, then I think we're on pretty safe ground without having to go, well, it's this thing, it's that thing, all these kinds of things. Yeah, good question.
Thanks.
Okay, with that we have might call it a night. Very good, very nice questions. Good, fun stuff to talk about. So, with that, we'll call it a night. Just there's again, as Langdon said, there's plenty of things coming up. Ajahn Dan's coming up this Friday night, which is a good opportunity if anybody hasn't ever seen Ajahn done. So yeah, and Ajahn Medito this weekend. So with that, we'll call it a night. And so thanks everyone. No problem.